It has very famous quotable lines in it, which come on page 252. On the left-hand side, about 10 lines down, the most quoted part of the speech, still quoted today: extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. But if you've taken a look at this whole address, is it extreme rhetoric? Is it not? While you're continuing to look, I will remind you of something the headnote reminds you of. This was a very hard-fought political campaign in 1964. And a man named Bill Moyers, a name you might know from watching the public broadcast system, because Bill Moyers had worked for them for many years and produced many news specials. Bill Moyers did a special advertisement for the Democratic Party and for Lyndon Johnson, which was an advertisement against Barry Goldwater and the Republican Party. And it showed a little girl plucking petals off of a flower. It's one of the most famous political advertisements in the history of the United States. It is. And you say, well, what is this little girl picking petals off of a flower about? But, as your headnote says, she picks these petals off a daisy, because what's the usual thing you say when you pick petals off of a daisy? Well, yes, yeah, no, you don't play Russian roulette that way, no, yes, she or he loves me not, loves me not, because you can't at first glance see how many petals there are, so when you get to the end, that's the last one, and then you know whether your lover really loves you or not. That's the idea behind it. So, but, just as she's doing this, there's a missile countdown. And then all of a sudden, there's a flash, and an atomic bomb explodes. This is what we call an ad that I think is rather extreme. I think it is an extreme form of visual rhetoric, and as your headnote tells you, Moyers later apologized for the ad. It's a pretty shocking ad. I don't know if anyone would actually run it today, but it was certainly run then, and it was run many times. Is Goldwater extreme in his rhetoric? He does make this statement, which I read, which is very often quoted. Katie?
I think this statement is certainly extreme. The Republican cause demands that we brand communism as the principal disturber of peace in the world today. Indeed, the only significant disturber of the peace.
Well, yes, but that had been said many times before by many other Republicans, indeed. And it had been virtually said by John Kennedy when he ran for office in the 1960s, because he wanted to show how tough he was on communism. He was going to be every bit as tough as Richard Nixon, because Richard Nixon had a reputation for being a great fighter of communism. So I'm not sure whether you may disagree with that statement. You may think, well, there are other enemies that are greater disturbers of the peace, but in international terms, that might be hard to convince people of. Whether it's true or not, again, that was a line that the Republican Party had taken for a number of years. It's a pretty strong statement, though, absolutely. When this speech was given, people thought it was definitely extreme. And it upset many Republicans, such as Nelson Rockefeller, who came from what state? New York. Where did Barry Goldwater come from? Arizona. Are you from Arizona, Seth? I never would have guessed. All right. Arizona. And Barry Goldwater was born before Arizona became a state. So we see here in some of this rhetoric to a shift in the power center of the Republican Party. The power center of the Republican Party at this time might be viewed as what part of the country? Not yet. Not yet. Goldwater starts to move it to the west, and then Reagan clinches it. And Nixon had already, to some degree, run a southern strategy. So it was moving to the south and the west from the certain parts of the Midwest and the Northeast. And so Republicans from the Northeast have not particularly fared terribly well under the conservative movement. Nelson Rockefeller didn't. Chris Christie didn't recently, in terms of national visibility. And the Republican Party has generally moved its center of gravity to the south and to the west. All right, is this extreme rhetoric? I'm interested. Hannah?
I think in some places, the use of, there's a lot of epitome that's and hyperbole, there's a lot of hyperbole that is used.
Okay, can you identify that?
Yes. 250, on page 250, the second paragraph.
Okay.
This party with its every action, every word, every breath, and every heartbeat has but a single resolve. The repetition of every hyperbolizes that whole thought, so that could be...
Isn't that just repetition, though? What's wrong with repetition?
I don't think there's anything wrong with repetition. I'm just saying that there were a couple places where I was like, really? That's a major claim to make. He promises things.
Yes, that's true.
And that he can't necessarily follow through on. And so that kind of...
But every politician does that.
Right.
Okay.
So
I'm being a little hard. I'm pushing back. Because I have a notion that at this time, this speech was seen as extreme rhetoric. But when we read it now, it's much harder to see it as extreme because of the way our political rhetoric has been changing. It's hard for me to characterize this as extreme. Strong, maybe questionable statements. Yes, Joel?
I actually really agree with that statement. When I was reading it, I was thinking this seems much more conciliatory than most of the rhetoric today. And if this were to come up, we would think, wow, that was like a well-tamed speech almost. Like in a lot of ways, he's not like calling names to like the Democratic Party. He even says some of the things that they stand for are some of the things that he stands for as well. And so especially when he talks about freedom and like how American is like the what was it? Like freedom's model. To the world. So it's much more conciliatory, I think, compared to a lot of what we hear today.
Yeah, it's an interesting time in American political history. The 1964 election was won. How did Goldwater fare? He lost badly. He picked a running mate who was a member of the House of Representatives from upstate New York, someone that very few people had ever heard of, which was a mistake. It didn't help him. He thought picking someone from the Northeast might help him get Northeast votes. It didn't particularly seem to do that. So Goldwater was defeated quite badly in 1964. And the old joke was, someone said, they told me that if I voted for Goldwater, we'd end up with inflation and a protracted war in Vietnam and 50,000 people dead and a runaway military budget. Well, I voted for Goldwater, and that's what we got. And there certainly is some truth to that. Now, we don't know what Goldwater's administration would have been like at all. That's pure speculation. But as the Vietnam War proceeded and was not settled, and it did proceed all through the late 60s, it was said that the United States was going to try to have guns and butter at the same time. It's a phrase you don't hear much anymore, but you probably will hear it once again at some time. Meaning we're going to have armaments and also we're going to have domestic economic success without inflation. But that is not what we ended up getting. And it ended up saddling the administration eventually of Jimmy Carter from 1976 to 1980 with some very serious problems. I won't spend too much time on it. This is Barbara Jordan, this is page 312. Barbara Jordan arguing for the impeachment of Richard M. Nixon. Barbara Jordan was a remarkable woman. She's a black woman from Texas, member of Congress. She was an exceptionally good extemporaneous orator. Sometimes maybe pushing things a little too far, overdoing some things, but very effective, very forceful. And here is her address as part of the impeachment of Richard Nixon. Don't forget, it is the House which accuses a president and draws up articles of impeachment. And then it is the Senate which tries the president. This is what happened, say, in the impeachment of Bill Clinton. Page 313, a little down in the middle of the page, he says, today I am an inquisitor. I believe hyperbole would not be fictional and would not overstate the solemnness that I feel right now. That itself is a hyperbolic statement, meaning I can use hyperbole and it won't be hyperbolic. Now I want to make a remark about this and some other statements that you've read in these speeches. There is a time and a place for the use of hyperbole or strong, over-the-top statements. So for example, you wouldn't say this if you were at a town meeting arguing for the fluoridation of the town's water supply. It would seem a little preposterous, right? Now that's an important subject. You're going to protect children from having tooth decay. There's no doubt about that. So, every subject needs to be approached with the proportionality of its weight and seriousness. If you are more weighty and more serious than the subject, you'll end up seeming ponderous and you'll overshoot your target. If you don't live up to the seriousness of the subject, you will seem too meek. You have to gauge that. Now, the impeachment of a president is a pretty serious subject matter. It doesn't get much more serious than that in terms of constitutional action. So she has a perfect right to say that. But if you were to say that, arguing just, say, any old bill in the House of Representatives, it would seem odd. That is why Daniel Webster, whom we'll be looking at some soon, said that all rhetoric, all good rhetoric, is a confluence of a moment, a matter, and a man, by which we today should interpret to mean a person. Meaning there's a particular time and timing to it, there's a particular argument or case to be made, and there's a particular person who will make that. And like a good comedian, where timing is everything, so as a good rhetorician, whether you're presenting a written or an oral argument, timing is everything. You ever been in a meeting where the floor is open and it seems like no one wants to speak first? Why might someone, say in the undergraduate council or in a faculty meeting over in University Hall, why might someone on a significant issue not want to get up and speak first? I mean, maybe they do, but very often they don't. What would be the motive for not wanting to do that? Philip?
They want to get a lay of the land, see what other people have to say first before they respond.
Yeah, you want to see what other people have to say, particularly perhaps your opposition. And you want to judge what arguments are out there. You want to test the timing and the moment. Then Jordan goes on and says, my faith in the Constitution, then this is typical of her rhetoric. But again, the situation seems to call for it. My faith in the Constitution is whole. It is complete. It is total. This is a triad, sometimes called a climactic triad in rhetoric, meaning you're using three things, hence a triad. And you're trying to make each successive term a little more emphatic. Could you say that total is the most emphatic of these three words? Why? Or if you think not, why not? Whole, complete, total. I once saw a student at MIT come out of a grocery store with only 2 items in the grocery basket. Cartons of milk and about 20 boxes of Total cereal. Well, it's total. Gives you all your vitamins and minerals that you need. It's easy shopping choice. I think total is more, I would argue. Why? Total war, total destruction. Complete means, but total seems to me to carry a more absolute reverberation to it. Sometimes she's good at these, sometimes she's less good. I'm not going to sit here and be an idle spectator to the diminution, the subversion, the destruction of the Constitution. Now, is that a little easier to say that that's a climactic triad? Yeah, diminution means to what?
Like reduce.
Yeah, reduce or make smaller. Subversion? Yes, to undercut, in this case, to subvert, to undercut, to get around it. But destruction, that's greater than all of those. They're all in play, but the most important one is mentioned last. And then her argument in the next paragraph, I suggest it is a misreading of the Constitution for any member here to assert that for a member to vote for an article of impeachment means that that member must be convinced that the president should be removed from office. The Constitution doesn't say that. Indeed, it doesn't say that. The act of impeachment is an act of accusation. It's not an act of judgment. It's like a prosecutor bringing a charge, which is different from a judge and a jury and a courtroom deciding upon a verdict. She goes on in the next 2 pages, 314, 315, and I will not read the details, but ask you to pay some attention to them. She quotes a lot of previous authorities and cases. She has done homework. She has gone back in the political record of the country to a pretty detailed extent. And I may say that she did this all without the aid of the internet, Google, or anything else. She walked into a library and she hit the law books and the history books. And she or someone on her staff came up with this. And if you read on 314 and then on 315, beginning with impeachment criteria, you will see a set of historical precedents and statements which bolster her case. What is the effect of this aside from bolstering the case she is making? It is to give the audience confidence that she has a sense of what the historical import of this act of impeachment actually is. It's a very rare act in American political history. It's very rare, in fact. Nixon never came to hearing in the Senate for impeachment because why? He resigned. That's correct. So Nixon was never judged in the Senate. Clinton was judged, and he was not found guilty by the 2/3 that you need in the Senate. But he had some very eloquent defenders in the Senate as well as some eloquent accusers. So Barbara Jordan is someone who remained a kind of emblem of impassioned conviction for the Constitution. And if you look at 314, a little more than halfway down, she says something quite interesting, worth remembering not only today, but at any time. The drawing of political lines goes to the motivation behind impeachment. Certainly does. But impeachment must proceed within the confines of the constitutional term, high crimes and misdemeanors, meaning it is not and should not be a partisan act. It should be a legal act of accusation. That's what it should be. Now you can say, well, of course it's going to be a partisan act, can't help but be. But she is trying to make that distinction, that you cannot impeach someone simply for partisan reasons. You have to do it for reasons that involve high crimes and misdemeanors. Now that phrase high crimes is an interesting one. High crimes essentially means crimes in high office, not great crimes, but it means crimes that one commits in high office. Just the way high treason is treason against someone in high office, against, say, a monarch, or against the central power of a government. Indignation so great as to overgrow party interest may secure a conviction, but nothing else can. Quoting Woodrow Wilson, indignation so great as to overgrow party interest may secure a conviction, but nothing else can. In other words, it would be a terrible thing if we were able to impeach just on the basis of party interest. That should not secure a conviction. Conviction should be secured on the basis of a rule of law and the judgment of it. Turn to page 341, could you? Ronald Reagan vows a national crusade to make America great again. It is so funny how phrases pop up. If you look at American political rhetorical history, you will see phrases and themes reappear for decade after decade after decade. And then they go underground for a while and people forget them, and then someone resurrects them and brings them back.